Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Bleckman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. It's me, Phil Bleckman, and with me as always, my co-host and excellent videographer, Zach Clark. Zach, how's it going, man?
Yeah. I mean, this is what, take 4 of the show so far?
Honestly, what we should do, one of these days, you have to like trim your beard just enough to get like my scruff. I'll wear the glasses and the yellow thing. We'll just role reversal for a day.
Yeah,
that's great. The content people really want to see. They want to see some role reversals.
Yeah. So anyhow, this episode we're going to be talking about the spoilers from the Streets of New CAPENNA Commander set. The set comes out this Friday. There's a lot. There's a few cards to go over, and then there's a few cards to just talk about, and some mechanics that are pretty interesting. That I think that they don't have a home yet, but they could in the near future.
It's always cool too. The commander sets are always. I feel like the commander sets are likelier to hit in Legacy.
Yeah.
Than the actual.
Well, they can up the power from standard, right?
Well, also because they're designing cards for a 4-player format, and oftentimes when you condense that down to a 2-player format, shit breaks, like TNN or CAPENNA.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas TNN is not that big of a deal. And same thing with CAPENNA in a 4-player game.
Right. That stuff just doesn't matter in a 4-player game, yeah.
Yeah. A 6-mana 5/5 doesn't really do it for you. So before we get into all that, hey, if you guys have been digging the content we're putting together, you think the quality of the videos has gone up, all that stuff. The sound quality is better, any of that. Like and subscribe, please. Help us out. And if you get a chance,
Smash the subscribe button.
It does wonders for us. It makes me feel really good. Like I see that number go up and I'm like, that's my whole day. So, hook that up. Without further ado, let's check out some cards.
Let's do it.
So the first thing I wanted to talk about is, as a whole, the Confluence cards. Mm-hmm. So we've got Maestros, Cabaretti, Obscura, Riveteers, and Brokers Confluences.
In my view, they're all cute. I looked at all of them. I was excited that maybe one of them could break through if one of them was like 3 mana, or they just made an additional charm that was a little bit up in the power level. But none of them are going to make it. They're all too expensive. Even the ones that you want to play are all blastable. It's just like we're not even going to go through like what each of them do. They're just all overcosted.
Yeah, the Confluences are... Did I say charms before? I meant Confluences.
Well, that's what... Yeah, no,
the Confluences...
Charms. Yeah, the difference of Confluences is that you can choose each mode more than once, but even with that benefit, they're still way too expensive for what they actually do.
Yeah. It's a real bummer that... and it's the same thing that I complained about the charms. It's like the designers don't understand that if you are committed to 3 colors, like, I wouldn't play any of these in Commander already, right? So if you're committed to 3 colors, like the effect has to be pretty powerful to break through and make this a playable card. Now I know that like the idea of design here isn't that like the Commander designers aren't like, I wonder if we can make this get through the Legacy. Obviously not. But all these cards are just, they're not great. They could be so much better, and they're not hitting it for me.
They really just feel like fat charms to me, and.
Yeah, they feel like fat charms, exactly, yeah.
Not close.
So let's talk about Anhelo. Anhelo?
I've been saying Anhelo as like it's angel with an H. Anhelo?
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but that's what I've been doing. Let me tell you, this card is sick. So it's Grixis for a 1/3. It has Death Touch. It's a legendary vampire assassin, and it says the first instant or sorcery you cast each turn has Casualty 2. Casualty is the new mechanic from the Maestros that says when you cast a spell, you may sacrifice a creature with that power or greater, according to its casualty number, and if you do, you get to copy that spell. So this just turns all of your spells into Casualty 2, and that's a really powerful effect. The downsides, though, are that it's a 1/3 for 3 mana that needs you to do something else, and then also have an additional body, and it itself does not turn on the Casualty 2 clause for the spells after that. If it were a 2/3, then and you could sack it to turn on its own clauses, that would be powerful. But it's like there's just enough hurdles here that it doesn't make it to me.
it's like, yeah, this card, it's so close to being like something you would be like, oh, I could try this out. It's just that like the way that the text works is like, even if you could sacrifice this because of its power, it'd be off the board and its ability wouldn't work. It's just like there's so much that's like just it's two ships passing in the night, this design. It just like doesn't make it all the way there.
So I don't know what if the spell exists or not. But because this is the card that can give any instant or sorcery casualty, if there is an effect that makes a creature makes a 2-power creature that you could then exploit, and also lets you pick up that spell, you could theoretically loop. So,
you can't because it's only the first spell.
Oh yeah, you're right, because the copy goes on the stack
only the
first.
First
Yeah.
spell.
It's the first. Yeah, you're right. It's the first instant and sorcery spell each turn.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they actually claused it so you can't loop. Never mind.
Yeah, they did. They weren't letting that shenanigans happen.
I overlooked the first instant each turn part clause because I was looking for cards that you could potentially go infinite with, but you can't. So now I'm totally off Anhelo. I'm really high on him because it's such a cool character, and I really like that it's like the second in command of. Like, I'm curious to see what happens lore-wise with Anhelo after Obnixilis murdered Xander and then essentially took over the Maestro. So
Xander didn't make it, guys.
So where does... Oh, yeah, spoilers, sorry. So where does... so then if Anhelo was the number 2, like, does Anhelo then have any loyalty or a working relationship with Obnixilis? Like, I'm now way more interested in the lore with this guy than him actually showing up in Legacy or any competitive format outside of EDH.
Yeah. So let's talk about a card that I think might actually have some legs in time, and that is Syrix, Carrier of the Flame. That
Syrix
is the
or Syrix?
Phoenix.
It might be Syrix.
I like Syrix.
I've been saying Syrix, similar to like Syracuse.
Okay.
But I don't know. I think you're probably right. It's probably Syrix. I've been saying Syrix.
I'm gonna go with Syrix just because if I'm wrong, I'm still gonna go with Syrix because Teferi.
Yeah, you're the Teferi guy. So I'm actually gonna go back. I'm gonna say Syrix. Okay, so Syrix.
Okay. I've been known to mispronounce a word or two in the Magic the Gathering folklore here.
I'm gonna say
Syrix,
Career of the Flame.
Career. All right. So anyhow, he is a 2 black-red, and he is a 3/3 flying haste Phoenix. And at the beginning of each end step, if a creature left your graveyard this turn, target Phoenix you control deals damage equal to its power to any target. And then, whenever a Phoenix you control dies, you may cast Syrix, Carrier of the Flame from your graveyard. So. Here's the thing. This is an attrition-y kind of card, and it has a couple interesting features. One, it works kind of well with Arclight Phoenix if you can make like the Arclight Phoenix thing happen, and you happen to have this guy in play as well through various means. You've got to get this guy into play, which is its own issue, obviously. But you can lean more into that style of deck. And even play something like a Reanimator effect just for this guy. I wish he cost 3 because it would have been perfect to have this guy for Unearth. But then you can do things like play Relic of Progenitus or Lantern of the whatever, Seer's Lantern, or I forget the name. What's that card? The new sideboard card. Yeah, no, not Lantern of Insight. The lantern that removes. Soul Guide Lantern, yeah. So you could do that to remove creatures from your graveyard or from your opponent's graveyard, and just by the virtue of having this guy in there, and having a random sideboard plan against your opponent's like Reanimator style deck, or just removing stuff to get creatures out of his yard or out of your yard, you can just do extra damage, which is pretty cool. Do I think that there's a place for this just yet? No. I think that the format has to shift more mid-rangey for this to work, but it's at least an interesting design.
Yeah. So the restrictive quality here is that it says whenever another Phoenix you control dies, you may cast Syrix. So it's not the recursive part of it isn't free like it is for Arclight Phoenix. However,
yeah, of course.
However, I do like the idea that it is something else that you can play in Arclight Phoenix as an additional thing that you would like to discard, or another thing that you'd like to dump off a Buried Alive. One of the issues that I always had with Arclight Phoenix was that it was extremely anemic. Like, once they dealt with the first wave, trying to rebuild off of that, and your payoff is just a couple of 3/2s, was never really all that good because you're dumping so many resources. But being able to having additional Buried Alives not be dead cards later on because you've already gotten rid of all your Phoenixes, and also this being just a mana sink if you can recur the Phoenixes back and forth.
Exactly.
The other thing too is that it says at the beginning of each end step, if a creature left your graveyard target Phoenix, does that mean, is that multiple? Like if you had multiple Phoenixes return?
Exactly. So if you had like, let's say two Arclight Phoenixes come back from your graveyard, that means you're going to get to do this twice.
Right. That's not. It's not a once per turn trigger. So
each one is an instance of a Phoenix coming back.
This is also an example too of this type of, like, that particular trigger. Like, let's say this card is on the table, right? Like, let's say you have Syrix on the table. Any type of recursive creature clause on, like, I always go, anytime you can bring something back from the graveyard, I always lean towards Gravecrawler, right? Because it's just the de facto, like, way to recur a creature out of your yard. So if let's say...
only if it was a Phoenix zombie.
Well, if only if it were a Phoenix zombie, true, yeah. But the fact, like, if you have this thing on the table, then with a sack outlet and a Gravecrawler, every time you recur a Gravecrawler and a turn off of that sack outlet, whether it be with a Carrion Feeder or whatever, this will dome them each time you did that. So if you were able to just do that 3 times, it's going to dome them for 9. Like, that's,
it's pretty good.
That's potentially pretty powerful, and you're already incentivized to move into red anyway, into zombies, for sideboard cards and for stuff like Goblin Bombardment and whatnot. So, and I feel like there are homes for this card. It's just it may be too overcosted.
Well, here's another thing to take into account. Let's say that our conversation last week, they get rid of they don't get rid of Daze, but they get rid of Murktide Regent, right? So now we're in a situation where Daze isn't really great against this particular 4-drop, because in time it's going to come back, right? Like, you're going to figure out ways to recur this, and Daze eventually you're just going to overpower your Delver type opponents with kind of a massive board advantage that just keeps recurring itself. And that's when you can start shooting down Delvers with these things as any target, right? You're not going to shoot down a Murktide Regent, probably, like, unless you get 2 triggers and do that. But in a world where Daze is king, this is a particular 4-drop that, like, has that attrition advantage that actually can kind of work its way around that sort of play pattern.
I think the other thing to consider here too, that's not immediately obvious, is that it seems like if another creature if another Phoenix you control dies, you may cast Syrix from your graveyard this turn, or you may cast it from your graveyard. I think the Phoenix clause there is actually the most difficult hoop to jump through. It's that it specifically needs to be a Phoenix that dies in order for you to get the ability to cast Syrix from the yard. But actually spending 4 mana to recur Syrix to play, it's not just 4 mana make a 3/3. It's 4 mana make a 3/3 with haste, so you get in the attack, but then also it will trigger off of itself.
And it shoots, and it shoots something.
So it's potentially 4 mana to either Flame Tongue Kavu, Blightning somebody, or just dome them straight for 6. And so, like, that's actually a pretty good conversion rate, because you can there are elements where you can control the board here. And I think the deep dive here is really finding cheaper Phoenixes to bring back into play, because right now, if you lean on Arclight Phoenix, you're kind of constrained in, like, the requirements of what that deck needs, which is, like, a lot of instants and sorceries. And this card also really wants the ability to have creatures die and creatures leave the graveyard. So if you're all in on Arclight Phoenix, it's probably going to be really hard to, like, loop through getting this done. I don't know if you would take the additional step, but it seems like there's enough working pieces here that you could probably find something reasonable to get a good recursion engine here.
It's a card that I think needs more time and to see more Phoenixes. And look, this is a thing that as a Commander player, this card's a big piece of news, because now you can have a Phoenix Commander. Yeah. So that means that we may see more Phoenix support in the near future as well, if this Commander becomes popular. So hot tip: play this in Commander. talk it up, and then maybe WotC will start printing cheaper Phoenixes, right?
I mean, should caveat, like, this isn't going to be hitting the top tables of Legacy anytime soon.
No,
but
no.
There's space here for a cool deck to take to an FNM that actually can do some powerful things, because all of the effects here are pretty inviting and are seemingly doable with tools that are currently in the format. So it's not breaking anything, but it's definitely closer than Anhelo was.
Yeah. So at the very end of the last video, we touched on Bennie Bracks, Zoologist. Why don't you take it away, though? I think you have a lot of takes on this card.
So I don't know if Bennie Bracks is going to make it, but what I do like about it is, we know Convoke is very good, right? It's just being able to cast your spells for free is obviously good. So when you can turn other resources into mana, and in this case you can turn every creature into a mana dork, it's pretty powerful, and all it asks is one white. Now it says...
Well, let's talk about what he does, what he is first.
It's a 4-mana 3/2, 3 and a white, and it says at the beginning of each end step, if you created a token this turn, draw a card, and it has Convoke. Now, it doesn't specify what kind of token, so it's literally any token.
Yeah, it could be treasure token, right?
Treasure token, and what it means, I mean, obviously this is going to be a banger in EDH, but in Legacy, it can come down theoretically for 0 mana if you're a deck that goes wide. But then it also allows you to potentially draw 3 cards every turn cycle. So you have your draw step, you can make a token on your turn. If you can make a token on your opponent's turn, then you'll draw a card for each of those on each end step. So it's a way to effectively get a really nice draw engine going. Now, it's fragile and it's legendary, but that legendary has pros and cons, right? Because you can also use Caracas as well as they can.
Yeah.
But I think like the fact that this card, it's not asking for a lot, right? It's just asking for a deck that makes tokens, and that's kind of it. And being able to draw that many cards per turn and just really bury your opponent under a volume of resources, this one sticks out to me as like, this is the powerful card from this commander set. Even though I don't know if it has a home yet, I feel like it may be able to generate a home somewhere. Like the fact that Urza Saga produces token, Retrofitting Foundry already produces token. Like there's like that shell of like a pillar in the format that's already pumping out a lot of tokens at a time. Makes me think that this could just work very well. Like a guy named Eddie at my local who's very high on Mono White Painter. That deck produces a lot of tokens if he wants to between Urza Saga and Retrofitter Foundry.
Yep.
And something like this, I feel like could open up decks or really move Urza Saga towards white to be able to take advantage of a really powerful draw engine.
You know, something I wanted to mention as like sort of a deck building consideration / meta consideration is that, you know, we don't have a ton of cards to talk about for this particular commander set for Legacy. And I think that's because the format is kind of currently solved. And thusly, like, you know, every answer to every neat or interesting card you have is like, no, it'll just lose to X, right? And there's not a lot of room to innovate right now. And I think that's sort of an issue that you run into when a format is solved, is that the new cards come in and they're not as exciting for that reason. But I think that if something changes relatively soon in the future, we could see a lot of really interesting cards in this particular set, and maybe even in the last one that we didn't really cover because there just wasn't room for that in the format. And stuff like, I mean, look at Syrix, look at Bennie Bracks. Those are just on the fringe of being interesting enough to talk about, but maybe not playable now. So many of those cards could be opened up if there was some sort of movement in the format as far as like a ban or a new printing that like changed the format some.
Yeah, I agree that the format seems pretty much solved at this point until there's another shakeup or another powerful card enters the format. But what I like particularly about Bennie Bracks is that it fills in my head what is always worthwhile for a build around for a potentially new deck, which is a really effective draw engine, a really effective tutor, or something that is just really powerful on raw rate or a prison piece. So those facets in my head are always the ones that will scream new archetype. Something when I first saw this that shouted out to me was something like Standstill, where it's like, this is a really powerful draw card engine that draws cards that you can then build a deck around. This feels similar to something like that. And so, again, I don't think this is going to be breaking through in the top tables anytime soon. But this is the closest in all of the Commander product for New Capenna, I think this card's the closest to getting into the format.
Well, let's talk about another card that won't be breaking the top tables anytime soon, and that is Swindler's Scheme. Swindler's Scheme is sort of a counterbalance variant. So it's an enchantment for 3 mana, 2 and 1 blue, and it says whenever an opponent casts a spell from their hand, you may reveal the top card from your library. If it shares a card type with that spell, counter that spell, and then the opponent gets to cast yours without paying its mana cost.
The card that you revealed.
The card that you revealed. So that seems bad, right? Like immediately, like I think me and Phil looked at this card and went, "Ooh, counterbalance," and we realized that like we don't really want our opponent to cast our brainstorm, or whatever. But that's when I thought about CEDH, and a big thing in CEDH is a deck called a deck that winds around this card, Limvala Azorius Renegade. And this works perfectly with Limvala. Lavinia, yeah, Azorius.
Limvala is very different.
Yeah, Limvala is different. Lavinia Azorius Renegade and this card work really well if you can make it work. So if you can put a deck together that has this and counterbalance and Lavinia, maybe some other lock pieces that synergize well together, like you've almost got something there. I feel like. I
think that your idea, your thought process is solid. It's just still too many hoops. It
is too many hoops. We need it needs a rug, right? It needs something to tie the room together, and we don't have that just yet. But this is like another interesting I'm gonna love playing this in EDH for sure because it's just such a bonkers thing to have happen.
I mean, the thing is, like in EDH, you also get top, and if you can just
you do get top.
Like that is
you only get one though.
You only get one. Obviously, you only get one. But I mean, it's still like the space of being able to counter cards of the same type as opposed to cards of the same costs in this counterbalance space is an interesting place to explore. There are both the clause of they get to potentially counter get your spell, they get to cast your spell if you counter theirs, but also the clause on here that it's only countering spells from their hand.
Yeah,
I get that that's niche, but there's enough things on here that I'm like, there's no way. There's just no way. And,
it's a lot. It's a lot.
And as much as good as it sounds, it's just in practice there's just no way.
I mean, at its normal scenario. Isn't it awesome that you could counter a reanimate with a ponder? You could have a ponder, but you're not getting that Grizzlebrain.
Yeah, I mean, what will ultimately happen is you'll counter the reanimate, revealing your ponder. They'll ponder, find another reanimate, and kill you.
And they'll cast animate dead, and you're like, I don't even have any enchantments in my deck.
Reveal another Swindler scheme. You reveal another Swindler scheme. They get to cast a Swindler scheme, and then they're doing it to you, and
no,
get wrecked.
Oh, dude, that would be the worst.
That'd be the worst. That'd be very bad.
It'd be an amazing game. That would be the greatest game ever to commentate on, though.
Oh yeah, the swings would be epic, but man, it would feel very bad.
I just got a notice from my Robinhood app that it's going to purchase $40 in Hasbro for me tomorrow. Nice. So, woo! I'm an investor, boys. Anyhow, next card is and this. Wow, this card is so meta because In Too Deep is how I feel about how we're going into this review set, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going In Too Deep.
I'm with you.
In Too Deep is a 2 blue mana aura enchantment. It has split second, and it says enchant creature, planeswalker, or clue, and it turns that permanent into a clue.
And then it loses all of its other abilities. So, this is just a 2 mana uncounterable, essentially removal spell that allows them to cycle that permanent into a new card. What I don't get is why is it templated that you can also enchant a clue if it just turns it into a clue?
So I figured that out. I figured that out. You did miss something. There is a card called Agent's Toolkit, which is a clue, and it's an artifact. So this doesn't target artifacts, but it could target Agent's Toolkit.
Oh, okay. So if they put
not that that's cool, but that's okay. A reason.
So essentially, they have now made clues a subtype of artifacts and therefore you can target a subtype of artifacts, and that's what. Okay, I get it. Oh, okay.
That's the thing.
This card is cool. I mean, essentially removing a creature or planeswalker from the table and it loses all of its other abilities, like that is very relevant. It's a sorcery speed Doomblade, right?
I just wish, like, so if it is a sorcery speed Doomblade that your opponent can't react to in any way, I wish it was also like you could cast this at instant speed, because that's what Split Second feels like to me. Is like you should be able to cast it at instant speed, because in a scenario where I could kind of like stop a Grizzlebrand from doing something, if my opponent was like, okay, I need to attack with my Grizzlebrand before I draw 7 cards because I'm at like 7 life or something like that, you know, or I'm at 10 and I'm afraid of your bolt, and you're like, okay, hold on, I'm gonna do this, and they can't even respond to stop that from happening. Would be awesome. But because it's a sorcery speed uncounterable version of this, it stinks that it's not like slightly better.
I think
also the idea that it can get your Grizzlebrand back in your graveyard where you probably want it to cast another thing is also not great.
Yeah, I don't think that's great. I think the actual really powerful thing here is that it's planeswalker removal in mono blue.
Yeah,
that's like blue to get rid of a planeswalker is really big. Now I get that the planeswalker in this format, they all draw a card when they come in, so you spending 2 mana on their card, which has already produced a card, and then it will produce them another card. That's not a good exchange. Like,
it's a tempo format, man. You know that might not matter to them by then.
I think the thing that's interesting about this is for decks that struggled to deal with, let's say, larger creatures. This being in blue means that you can deal with that type, like the big stuff, and then it will cost them 2 mana to get it off the table if they need to do that. The other thing that this does is being able to turn off abilities. So one of the cards that I thought about with this was you can turn off their Sanctum Prelate and compel them to like spend their time flickering it and try and doing something like. I think that this card isn't going to break anything, but it is really powerful. Like an uncounterable way to remove 2 very relevant card types at.
In a color that doesn't have a lot of options for that too, yeah.
I think it's just like it's a weird way to pivot blue into removal that isn't bounce, and I don't
or like suspend, you know.
Yeah, like suspend does get rid of it, but then they get it back later. Where this theoretically doesn't let them have it back. Like they get a new card, they get a cycle, which is still not good for you. But in terms of removing a problem, in blue, this is really this is a very powerful effect.
Mono blue Delver, here we come.
I wonder if there's any benefit to it being an enchantment too. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Like I have recently been playing
Delirium.
I mean, but I was also recently playing a version of Miracles that was just trying out Tameshi. Now Tameshi feels a little bit cute, but something like that where Tameshi cares about being able to pull artifacts or enchantments out of your graveyard. I mean, I wonder if there's enough unexplored territory with it being an enchantment as a removal spell that you would care about. Or, I mean, I don't know. It's also just 2 blue pips on the table. Like, does that mean anything? I feel like there's a lot of space that this could. I don't know. I'm really intrigued by this card, and I feel like this is way closer than we think.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's go on to the next one. Protection Racket. That is a 3-mana enchantment. It's enchantment heavy review here. 3-mana enchantment that says, at the beginning of your upkeep, repeat the following process for each opponent in turn order. Reveal the top card of your library. That player may pay life equal to that card's mana value. If they do, exile that card. Otherwise, put it in your hand.
Okay, so
this is like a Bob. Like they get to choose. Almost like Sim Prodder. It works like Sim Prodder.
It's extremely Sim Prodder. It's like exactly Sim Prodder, except that it's an enchantment, and
it's not a creature to be removed, right? Sim Prodder, you basically just bolt every time you saw it.
There's no way this would see play, because I can't imagine what kind of deck building constraint you would have to do that this would generate you enough card advantage and not have enough of a drawback on the fact that it's a Punisher mechanic.
You need like 3 drops, right? You need like it to hit 3 drops like kind of constantly. I mean, this could be the thing is like the decks that you would throw this into that you would get that value out of are like Grixis control, and Grixis control doesn't need something like this,
Yeah,
right?
they get to control whether or not you actually draw that card, and there's just no way that.
And they're exiling it, so it's not like it just goes on the top of your deck and then you get it like in another turn or something. They're choosing to get rid of it.
You're exiling card by it's essentially doming them. If they choose to exile it, it domes them.
Yeah, it's just
it's too expensive. You would need this
right.
would need to be like black, like 1 black mana.
1 black, yeah. Interesting ability, but like, I wanted to point that out. So let's talk about one that I do think could see some play, and that's Body Count. Body Count is a 3-mana instant that's 2 and a black, and it has Spectacle 1 black. So if you've damaged your opponent this turn, you can play it for 1 black, and it says draw a card for each creature that died under your control this turn.
So this is there is a 3-mana zombie. I think it's Liliana something, but it's a zombie. It's a 3/1 with flash that has exactly this ability. Draw a card for each creature that died under your control this turn. Now, that card has seen no play. So this being an instant, I don't think makes that a difference because this is asking you to play creatures, and that is a creature, so it's more in line with what you want to be doing. So the real payoff here has to be converting it for its spectacle cost, which makes me makes me think that the only way that this sees play is if it is part of some kind of degenerate combo that is looking for this to pull you up a bunch of resources so you can continue going off. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely combo abilities with this card. Like, you can
this isn't a fair card. You're not playing this fair.
Yeah, I think you're. Yeah, if you're playing it fair, you're probably doing it wrong for sure.
Definitely doing it wrong.
But the spectacle part is actually the part that makes that part really strange because it's like, what are you doing to do damage before that? You're probably going to cast this for its full mana value if you're playing it unfairly.
Dude, Zombie Bombardment is getting a bunch of interesting tools here. None of which of them are good enough, but like it is kind of interesting that you could just be like, sack my board, buy back my whole board.
I mean, that's the beautiful thing about Zombardment is like, is that even a viable deck?
No, it's not. It's definitely not.
So like, no, but I'm saying like you could show up at an FNM with that and do okay. Mm-hmm. So like this card is a toolbox card for that, and that's fine. Yep. Is it going to get there like in a GP or something? Not that GPs exist anymore, but like, of course not. But like, this is an interesting. It's an interesting role player in a deck that you might see at a local.
Whenever Nate was extremely excited about Body Count. So when he comes up with the brew that 5-0 is a league, and then suddenly taking down challenges, we'll have him on and interview him about it.
Of course. So the other one I wanted to talk about is Lethal Scheme. Lethal Scheme is a 4-mana that's 2 and 2 black instant with Convoke, which is why we're talking about this card. And it says destroy target creature or planeswalker. Each creature that convoked Lethal Scheme connives.
So this card is very cool so for a long time I tried to make zombies work. There's a bunch of footage of me playing literal zombie tribal on 90s MTG. You could go to Chris's site, Chris's YouTube channel and watch those games. The deck is obviously not good. But this card, man, Convoke, meaning that this card is just free if you go wide. Now, if it was just, if this was just a Hero's Downfall for 4 mana that had Convoke, it would not be nearly good enough. But
the connive is what's really interesting here. Is like if you read this card, it's like do this. All these creatures probably get +1/+0. Or like let's say 3 out of 4 of them get +1, +1/+1, and you're looting. That's a lot. There's a lot going on in this card. A lot.
So here's a play pattern that would come up that when I was playing zombies would come up a lot. So you go turn 1 drop zombie. Turn 2 Lazotep Reaver. For those of you who don't remember, why would you? It's a 1/2 for 2 mana that when it ETBs it amasses.
Makes a guy, right?
Yeah, so amasses 1, which is a zombie. So it makes a 1/1 zombie token. And so on let's say you go turn 1 Crypt Breaker, turn 2 Lazotep Reaver, draw a card, untap. Play a 4th zombie, you can now turn on Lethal Scheme by convoking all of those creatures, draw 4, essentially loot 4 cards, anthem your whole board, and destroy whatever they put into play. Like, that is a really, really powerful sequence. Okay, I'm going to loot 4 cards, anthem my board, and deal with what you just did while I didn't have to take any part of my turn off. That's very good. Like,
yeah, I mean that's right up there with like in standard. What was that? Convoke card that did 4 damage? Like, you were playing that with all the goblin tokens and stuff.
I know what you're talking about.
I forget what it's called, but like that card was amazing because like
Stoke the Flames.
Yeah, Stoke the Flames. So like your turn 1 would be like a guy. Your turn 2 would be play what's it called?
They played the goblin thing where they laid
fodder, like dragon fodder,
yeah,
right?
It was 3 mana to make 3 1/1s, and then you would convert.
Yeah, hurtling outburst, and then boom.
You would 2-spell. This card is the fact that this card means that every creature, if you can really leverage the connive is what really puts this card over the top. Like a free removal spell, sure, cool. Like Force of Will exists, but the fact that this is both an anthem, a card filter, and a removal spell, potentially for free, that's where like this card. Oh man, I am very excited to try this card.
I'm actually thinking about like even in like Death Shadow, like just reducing the mana cost on this by 1 to like just try and make like get rid of a giant block, maybe a Death Touch guy that like is going to mess up your shadow. And then being able to convoke as well is connive and convoke both on this card. Being able to connive as well, like that's just something to do, you know. Like this is a card that you could see just popping in as a 1/of. As like a 2 to 3 mana card that loots and does what's called Hero's Downfall.
Yeah, I think if you're leaning anywhere in creatures, because like even something as simple as like this will turn on Baleful Strix into a Birds of Paradise, right? Because it can pay for the black part of the card. So it's like I brought up only zombies, but this can go into any deck that has creatures that aren't black as well, and that is important. Like even if you get this card down to just black, if you're a deck that can afford that mana cost, being able to loot twice and pump 2 creatures is also really solid. Like if you are in if you have like a Baleful Strix and a Snapcaster, and all of a sudden you turn 3 damage a turn into 5 damage a turn, plus you looted 2, plus you remove something at instant speed, that's really solid. And then being able to like if you have a Snapcaster and you target this in your graveyard, you can convoke from your graveyard too. Like if you target it with as flag.
Yep. So you can convoke the Snapcaster.
That's what I mean. So like,
it becomes a 3/2 Snapcaster, and it loots, feeding your other Snapcaster mages, right?
Well, turning it into a Hero's Downfall. So it's like, it's not far. Like I think that this card is legitimate, and it just. Yeah. The downside is that it prices you into playing with creatures. Like you have to commit to being able to play creatures, and hopefully some of those creatures are black, because you do need to be able to produce double black to actually turn this card on. But this one is great. This one's really good.
This might be the real deal. Yeah,
this is the real deal.
All right. Let's talk about Determined Iteration, another enchantment. This is 1 in a red, and it says at the beginning of combat on your turn, populate. The token created this way gains haste, then you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step.
Go ahead.
Hard pass?
I'm still pulling it up. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the thing that's interesting about this card is basically if you can start getting value out of those tokens that are going to die. So if you're sacrificing that token to something else every turn. I mean, it's the same. It was the same status that kind of everyone that looked at this card in EDH talked about. But being able to do things like do casualty with this token means that you're not even losing the advantage of having that creature because it's dying anyhow. So I think this is good in a scenario where you've already got a small token synergy in your deck, and you have casualty cards in your deck. That's kind of where I'm coming from with this. It's 2 mana, so that's the thing to me that kind of stood out about this card.
This strikes me as something that's like kind of in the realm of Bitter Blossom. The issue why I don't think that this will see any play is because it's asking you to do something else.
You already have to. Yeah, you already have to have the tokens on the board, which is definitely the hoop to jump through with this card.
The token on the board. The tokens have to be powerful enough that you're willing to put in an enchantment into play that wants to make more of those tokens. And if we've seen anything in recent years from Legacy, putting anything synergistic into your deck that doesn't do anything by itself is just a non-starter. And the fact that
it's tough,
this doesn't even have the failsafe of being blue, so you can pitch it to force. It's just I feel like the rate on this card is good. What this card is,
it's no Swindler scheme, right?
What this card does, in theory, is very powerful. If you could pair it with something, if you pair it with something that you'd want to populate for value, the issue is that it does nothing by itself. You have to do something else, and that kind of synergy just can't exist in Legacy.
Yeah.
All
right, so let's check out
at the moment.
Let's check out Spellbinding Soprano. This is a 2-mana 2/2 human bard, 1 in a red, and it says whenever it attacks, instant and sorcery spells you cast this turn cost 1 less.
And then it has Encore for 3 in a red, which is
the Encore.
You pay that cost, you exile it from your yard, and then in Legacy that means that you would create 1 token that attacks your opponent this turn. If able, it gains haste, and then you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So I don't know when you would ever do that, maybe in a long drawn-out game. But essentially, this is a 2-mana 2/2 that when it attacks, it gives you a Goblin Electromancer ability. And that's where I go, why wouldn't you just be playing
Why would you play Goblin Electromancer? Yeah.
The only way that this, this is I feel like for EDH, at least this is the Encore is actually powerful because you get 3 copies, so you get a massive.
Yeah, I mean, Encore is ridiculous in EDH, obviously.
The only way that this is actually powerful is if you're somehow comboing to reduce cards that give you additional combat steps. But
that would make sense.
There's just no way that exists in Legacy.
Yeah. All right, moving on to Boxing Ring.
I can't believe Boxing Ring is an artifact and not a land.
Right?
The card,
because the land is the other thing.
Arena exists.
They made the Triome. They made the Trioma land. This is better than Arena, I will say.
Yes.
This is an artifact. It's green. It's 1 in a green for whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control with the same mana value. I didn't read with the same mana value. Let's move on.
So, and then it has tap, create the second part of the card has tap, create a treasure token. Activate only if you control a creature that fought this turn. So,
I apologize to everyone. I mean, this is fine if you want to have your Delver fight another Delver, I guess. But
so
I didn't read that part.
The same mana value is where it becomes tough, and if this card were to see play at all, right? I don't think it will, but let's say for some reason you're in green and you want this because it is recursive removal, right? Every creature potentially turns into a removal spell. I think that it at most would be a sideboard card to see if you could line your stuff up, and then anything with Death Touch would immediately get the kill regardless of what it does. Again, it's too narrow. There's just more efficient things to be doing. If it shows up this was a type of thing where back in the day I could see it being you would play this and your Tarmogoyf would fight their Tarmogoyf and then you could push through for damage or something. But beyond that, it's not safe. It's unfortunate because the idea of Boxing Ring being a card and causing all the creatures to fight would be really good. It's also very flavorful that it is same mana value because that's a nod to the boxers being in the same weight class.
Gotta get a middleweight champion, welterweight, and
and
then after a certain point you can just have little Mac fight Mike Tyson, and they're not in the same weight class.
Right, yeah. I mean, the creating a treasure token is also a nod to the boxer winning their prize purse. This is a very flavorfully successful card, but it's not going to see any play in Legacy.
Right. On to and this is going to be fringe, but I want to talk about Dodgy Jalopy.
Dodgy Jalopy. I'll give this the award for best name.
It just has a good mouthfeel, right? Dodgy Jalopy.
Dodgy Jalopy. If my handle wasn't Forcefill, it would definitely be Dodgy Jalopy.
Yeah. So it's an artifact vehicle. It's 2 in a green for a trample. Dodgy Jalopy's power is equal to the highest mana value among creatures you control, and it has Scavenge. It's crew 3. It is an X5. So the only reason I wanted to bring this up is because of Shadow of Mortality, and if you can get this thing to, if you can get Shadow of Mortality out, and then you've got Dodgy Jalopy, you've got a 15/5 trampler, which is cool. But the Scavenge is also cool too.
Okay, so you can spend 3 mana to put 3 +1/+1 counters on a creature, which means that you put this vehicle in your yard somehow. And, dude, it's 3 mana. Uro and the Firewalkers exist. Let's move on.
Yeah, that's fair. I just wanted to point that out. Is that
it's the best name? Dodgy Jalopy.
You can. Yeah, it's a great name.
The nod for the name alone.
All right. Family's Favor. Family's Favor is another enchantment. It's 3 and a green, and it says whenever you attack, put a shield counter on target attacking creature. Until the end of turn, it gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, remove a shield counter from it. If you do, draw a card.
So it's too expensive, and it's not going to do anything in Legacy. Now,
I think so. This is a card that I think we had talked about this before. Just like Wild Defiance, where like it has a little bit of room to be played in what's it called in Infect as like a sideboard card. It's not filling the exact same role as Wild Defiance or what is it, Sanctum Sanctuary? Shaper Sanctuary. But being able to protect your guy once combat starts, it is kind of interesting because your opponent has to kill it beforehand before you start casting pump spells on it. And then if you're just like chipping in, you get to draw a card.
I just think that there's no way, even so, like hypothetically. I mean, you're the Infect guy, so you know better than I do. But I just can't imagine you're ever putting a 3-mana enchantment that doesn't do anything immediately. Like this only.
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't. It does do something immediately. If you have creatures on the board and you slam this, you're going to draw a card off of it. Several cards if you're attacking with more creatures.
Yeah, but like, whenever you attack, put a shield counter on target attacking creature. So, I mean, if you're already attacking with multiple creatures, aren't you likely just to kill them? Like, I don't know. It seems like this card is good when you're already doing what you want to be doing. I just can't imagine the scenarios where this is fixing your problems in any way or whatever problems you.
Well,
at that point, like, isn't Shaper Sanctuary just better because every time they target one of your creatures, you would draw a card and then you can use.
You could maybe draw a counter spell. Here's my thing is that if let's say you have a lightning bolt in your hand and I attack with my Glistener Elf, right?
Right.
I go to do a thing after you're like I don't have any blocks. I'm like okay, I'm gonna invigorate. You're like I'll bolt it. Let's say that's the end of the interaction. Now in this scenario, I have that. I go to attacks and you're like. I've got to bolt it now, right. Obviously, because like that's my only chance. And I go, okay, well now I'll invigorate it, and now I have the invigorate has been cast in response to you doing something. That's the huge part about this card is it makes your opponent have to react first to that free. That's a free card already. So, like to me, that's a free card every time.
You're saying that this card has the potential to change the initiative.
It changes the play pattern completely in Infect,
so, but I would take it one step back. Let's say you have that creature on the table, right? And you play this on 3. And then you want to go to attack. Then before combat, before this goes down, like if you're tapped out and then you would have to invigorate, the thing that they could do too is if they have, in that scenario too, that also assumes that they can't try and fight over your creature with this on the stack.
Oh, for sure. Like, if this is on the stack, they can try and kill it. Of course.
I guess, like...
But you also have the Invigorate in your hand.
Yeah, I guess
they
that
still have to do that.
You get a thick pump spell, and then you would still draw a card because you would go to combat. Okay.
It's all about sequencing. It's all about sequencing in Infect. And if you can make this card mess up your opponent's sequencing so that you get in for a kill, like, it's 100% worth it. And that's why it's different than Shaper Sanctuary and Wild Defiance. Wild Defiance is its own beast. Like... That card's just bonkers, and generally, you're running into the same scenarios where your opponent's like, it's a must kill. Like I have to kill this creature.
Okay,
but this is
if you have a Noble Hierarch and you put this into play on turn 2, and then Noble Hierarch also theoretically can start converting counters into
converting cards. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Zach. Okay. I'm all right, Zach.
Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah, you got me.
I'm not totally sold. But I'm definitely...
you would be upset if I played this against you, is all I'm saying.
I'm definitely... So before I wasn't even willing to shop in this store.
Yeah.
And now I'm interested in at least looking at what is available in the aisles. So...
Yeah.
I'm moved a little bit. I'm not sold. I'm not buying. But I'm not removing it from my cart.
Yeah, the people in the shop are at least charming, right?
This is better than this.
Yeah,
which is just as good as this.
How about that killer service? We got those food tokens for you, Phil.
Dude,
you were so worried last episode or 2 episodes ago about the food tokens. We got those food tokens.
I was really upset that
got those dishes.
Yeah, there's a bunch of people who are supposedly caterers.
They're out
serving
partying,
the cabaret at a party,
yeah.
and they don't produce food. There's no food
Killer
at
service.
all of the cabaret's party.
Look how good the flavor is on this card. It's not playable.
All right, so
it's not playable.
When Killer Service enters the battlefield, create a number of food tokens equal to the number of opponents you have in Legacy. That means 1. So it's 3 mana, create a food. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 2 and sacrifice a token. If you do, create a 4/4 green rhino creature token. Now, I am not totally off this being a powerful card because it doesn't specify what kind of token you have to sack.
Yeah.
And if there's anything that can make Asmora Namartica Daistina Koldakar a little bit more interesting, and you can convert the food that you're making off the Underworld Cookbook into 4/4 rhinos, now I'm not totally off of it.
We're cooking with gas. We're cooking with gas here.
It's one of those things again. Zach, I'm not buying, but I'm not removing it from my cart.
By the way, Asmora Namartica Daistina Koldakar, super upset. I watched the professor's latest video or whatever, and he didn't pronounce it. He's like Asmore. I'm like, what? And he kept saying this card.
Yeah.
This card.
Yeah.
This. I'm like, Asmora Namartica Daistina Koldakar. Come on.
Asmora Namartica Daistina Koldakar. It's fairly,
come on.
Yeah. It's
so easy.
Get with it. Yeah. It's
Prof.
It was
watch
hard.
our video.
It was difficult when it first came out. It's no longer difficult.
Yeah.
Although
Just say it like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, right?
I have since it came out, I've been pronouncing it as Asmora Namartica Daistina Koldakar, and apparently it's Asmora Namartica Daistina Koldakar. But
nah. Teferi.
Yeah.
All right, on to the next card. That is Cryptic Pursuit. Cryptic Pursuit is another enchantment. It is 4 mana. It's 2, a blue and a red. For whenever an instant or sorcery spell...
Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell.
Yeah. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, manifest the top card of your library. So it turns into a 2/2. Whenever a face-down creature you control dies, exile it if it's an instant or sorcery card, and you may cast it until the end of your next turn. So this is a card that, I again, just like what we were saying last episode... A 3-drop, a 4-drop can't really exist with Daze, especially this one because it's not really getting you any value from being in the yard. And obviously, if you were going to play a blue-red deck, you would be playing Daze and you would be playing Murktide Regent, and these are obviously way better options than playing this card. But this card has some interesting build-around abilities for later down the line if those cards aren't in the format anymore kind of situation.
I mean, whenever you cast is a really powerful line of text, and this one meaning that every instant or sorcery spell that you cast turns into a 2/2. It's not bad. Like, that's a really powerful line of text. It would be really powerful.
And it's like a 2/2 that you don't mind swinging in with because your opponent has no idea which one of those is an instant or sorcery. So they're literally playing shell game. Are straight griftering them.
At 4 mana, it's unplayable. At 2 mana, it's really powerful. At 3 mana, it's unplayable. At 2.5 mana, it's unplayable. So until they lop the mana cost in half, which I'm sure will happen in Modern Horizons 3, this is unplayable. Although
that's fair.
Although whenever you cast is definitely a line of text worth giving some.
I like this effect a lot, and I love the concept of the shell game where you have like 3 of these out, maybe 2 of them are lands, and one of them's an instant, and your opponent just has to like blindly guess if he's going to block the instant or not, you know?
I mean, there is something to be said that if you are trying to combo out, right? Like, let's say you're a combo deck and you're just casting a bajillion things all at once. First, you'd have to explain to me why you're not playing,
Empty the Warrens?
Well, this is like Empty the Warrens, because it creates 2/2s, but it functionally will also then draw you all their cards if they're able to figure a way out of it. But if you're not playing Galvanic Relay and you're interested in this instead of Empty.
There you go.
The difference is that Empty is a payoff, where this is something that you would play before you continue comboing your spells.
It's also an insurance policy if your opponent has a way to get rid of them, assuming that it's not Terminus isn't the way to getting rid of them.
This is one of those types of cards where because you have to play it before you start doing anything, which means that you can't like ritual into this and get payoffs. You have to play this and then start doing all that shit. I don't think it's going to see play because that's not the play pattern that a card like this needs to provide in order for it to be playable. But it does exist in the space where if you are a combo deck and you can't put this into play, it will function similar to like the Empty the Warrens effect where you can go wide as opposed to trying to figure out how to like dome them on the stack. But I think this is too many hoops.
Fair enough. All right. Let's talk about Gavel of the Righteous. This is a 2-mana artifact equipment that has equip 3 or remove a counter from Gavel of the Righteous. And it says at the beginning of combat, on your turn, put a charge counter onto Gavel of the Righteous. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each counter on Gavel of the Righteous. As long as Gavel of the Righteous has 4 or more counters, the equipped creature has double strike.
Okay, I mean, I guess everybody who loves playing Dice Factory, get your Surge nodes and have a great time.
Yeah, the only thing I thought was interesting about this card is its reduced equip cost. Yes. Obviously, you've got to make it. It's going to take time to build up, and obviously, getting 4 of these things on there. Like if you're hitting somebody with a gaveled up 4+4 double strike guy, good on you. You're killing it. And also, like, look, this is Death and Taxes is a control deck. It takes a while to get up to that point where you're beating people, so it's not insane to think that maybe they look at this in their 80 card deck and say, why not throw 1 in there, you know? So I don't know. There are plenty of other better cards to be playing in that deck, but like, who knows? Maybe you have all of your living weapon cards in your hand already.
What's that white card that from a recent set? It's 1 and a white, 1/1, and it says at the beginning of combat, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control.
That is Luminarch Aspirant.
Yes, Luminarch Aspirant was a playable card. It actually got errated on Arena to be at the end of your turn instead of at the beginning of combat.
So bad.
But like that card proved to be pretty good. It never found its way into Legacy, but the interesting thing about Gavel is that while Aspirant was a creature and you could tutor it off of something like Recruiter, this you can get off of your Stoneforge Mystic. And the interesting thing is Gavel of Righteous does essentially have a free equip the turn it comes in. So if you play this before combat, it'll get the charge counter. Then you can remove that counter to equip it to a creature. It won't get the bonus that turn, but then the next turn it will get +1/+1. So it's kind of doing something similar in that, like Luminarch Aspirant was. So, you know, having an Anthem every single turn and essentially the equip cost always being free, I'm not totally off of it. Like, free equip is no joke. And if you care about just making your creatures bigger to push through in combat in any way, that could be relevant. I'm not buying, but I'm not.
This card also just sits on the board and gets bigger over time. So, like, if your opponent Terminuses, you're keeping this on the board. It's not like a Batterskull where it's going to be very hard to equip Batterskull or Cauldra, where it's harder to equip those cards. If you're playing against a deck that wipes the board and you drop this, that deck has to deal with every single threat you ever put out afterwards, especially if it's at 4, 5, 6 +1/+1 counters later on.
This also, I mean,
something to think about.
Charge counters are a very relevant counter. Like that's a counter that matters. There's a lot of cards that care about charge counters.
Yeah.
And this is also a card that it's a rare card that, unlike Planeswalkers, also produces a counter every turn, and it's not on a creature, or it's not a creature or a Planeswalker, and it produces a counter every turn. So if you care about cards that remove counters from cards, this is also a really nice enabler for that kind of thing. If you care about the only deck that really cares about
or
charge
doubling
counters
season
is the only deck that cares about charge counters in particular is Dice Factory, but that deck does care about charge counters, and it's possible that they could just make like a really fat construct, load it up, give it double strike, and get in and hit hard really quick. So, I mean, again, this isn't going to be breaking into Tier 1 anytime soon, but don't be surprised if it shows up in a niche deck that's, you know, lingering around the bottom of the barrels of Legacy.
Cool. So let's talk about the card that Phil thinks is actually the best card in this format. And before we do that, In this format, in this set. Before we do that, let's talk about MoxField real fast. MoxField.com is our sponsor for this podcast. They are an amazing deck building website. It works on your PC. It works on your phone. You don't need an app. You just go on there, start building decks. MoxField.com, man. You can sort everything. It has all the same tags as Scryfall. They use Scryfall. They support Legacy. They support Old School. They support Pre-Modern. MoxField.com. Get in there. Phil, you want to talk about this last card?
Yeah, so Currency Converter is a 1-mana artifact that says whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. And then it has 2 tap, draw a card, then discard a card, so you get to loot. And then it has tap, put a card exiled with Currency Converter into your graveyard. If it's a land card, create a treasure token. If it's a non-land card, create a 2/2 black rogue creature token. So, as is the case with every 1-mana artifact from now until forever, if it's good with Urza Saga...
We gotta talk about it.
If it's good with Urza Saga,
yeah.
it's going to be playable because it means that it can come in for uncounterable for free and then start doing stuff. Now, this card is... If Retrofitter Foundry makes bodies, this card loots. And then it can convert the cards that you loot into mana or threats, which is better than Retrofitter Foundry. So it's possible that this card just takes the slot of Retrofitter Foundry as opposed to working alongside of it.
So my call on this, actually, because I've obviously been playing the deck, right, is that I would remove one, and a lot of decks are already doing this, is removing one Mox Opal, playing 3 Mox Opal, which is fine, and adding in this like random slot for this, and some of them are playing Lantern of the what was that card?
Soul Guide Lantern.
Soul Guide Lantern, yeah. Some of them are playing Soul Guide Lantern in the main as just like, hey, I've got this, I'm ready to go. But you could play this in the main and take out that one slot. Just a thought.
The idea of putting cards back into your graveyard is not a space that we see a lot of the time. Like I can't think of another card that does this in a way that is at a competitive rate, that you would take cards from exile and put them back into your graveyard.
Like only like the weird processor cards from Oath of the Gatewatch, right?
None of those are playable. But the fact that this one is just a mana rock, like if you're discarding, if you are putting lands from its exile into the graveyard, it's just a mana rock of any color. It just produces of any color because it's a treasure token, and then it also just pumps out 2/2s, and 2/2s are a lot bigger than 1/1s. So Retrofitter Foundry pumping out 1/1 servos. I get that those are also artifacts, which is definitely relevant with your constructs. And these 2/2 black rogues are not, but a 2/2 is still a lot bigger than a 1/1. And it's doing that for free. Like the clause to tap and put something back into your yard, it's 0 mana. So it's a 0 mana 2/2 if you're doing literally anything else. And whenever you discard a card, you may exile that card from your graveyard. It means that you can pick and choose what cards you actually want to exile. So if you like LED and don't want to put your Life from the Loam into exile, you want to leave it in your graveyard, you can choose to do so. So everything about this card is very powerful. Like even by itself, just going turn 1, play this, turn 2, you have the ability to loot, and then on turn 3, it's going to get you to 4 mana if you discarded a land card, so it'll ramp you. Or it can just start pumping out bodies. So like,
not to mention like, for free, those treasures are artifacts for your affinity and for
the treasure tokens are artifacts. The rogues are not.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. The treasure tokens are artifacts for affinity and for improvise.
Yes.
So like those are good. Those synergize very well with the deck already.
Right. It is much like Retrofitter Foundry. It's still an artifact that can produce more artifacts, which can anthem your constructs and all of that stuff. Yes, that is relevant. This one's a banger. Like the fact that Urza Saga exists means that this will 100% show up in Legacy. This is
pick it up.
This is the card that's guaranteed. Like if you are if you play anything remotely close to an Urza Saga deck, this is definite. Like right now, I'm looking.
Gotta have it. Gotta have one.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. It's selling for like $5 to $6. Definitely pick one up.
Scoop them up.
For sure,
scoop them up.
This is the type of
how much. How much is Retrofitter Foundry going for right now? How much is how much is Shadow Spear? Yeah, Shadow Spear is like $10, $15 right now. Pick these up. Pick these up.
This is the one to pick up because this one's arguably better than Retrofitter because it can produce mana. It's still producing bodies, but the fact that it produces mana is a huge deal, particularly because an issue that Urza Saga has consistently is that when you have to sacrifice it, you lose that land, you lose that mana.
Yeah.
Whereas Currency Converter solves that problem, and then it can turn like the fact that this will also lead to potentially anything. Like other interesting cards that care about discarding cards. So remember when Containment Construct, the 2-mana card from Kamigawa, I think it was. So what was the enchantment? The 1 in a blue enchantment that was essentially Survival of the Fittest for 1-mana artifacts, and people were playing.
Oh man,
you know what I'm talking about? And it was the combo that people were talking about. The combo
vaguely, yeah.
LEDs and you loop it. Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Why? It was the card I wanted to talk about too. I'm blanking on it, but. It's 1 in a blue. It's an enchantment, and it's blue. Discard an artifact, and then you can search your library for an artifact with CMC 1 or 0, or 1 or less.
I don't even know what that is.
It like spiked. It like went to like $25 because everybody saw a Containment Construct combo variant and thought it was awesome. But
okay,
I will think of it. It will come to me. I know it. It was the card I wanted to talk about. But
I'll put it right there.
But the fact that card is you got to watch the YouTube to know what I'm talking about. But the fact that card is a discard, so like that card cares about being able to find artifacts with 0 with CMC 1 or less, which this card is. But then it also enables discard. It discards an artifact to then tutor up something from your deck, and this just lets you convert what you discard into additional resources to do things with the cards that you tutored for. I think this card has so many potential homes that we're not even thinking about because it now is also asking you to find things that care about discarding. It works with all of the artifact synergies. It works with Urza Saga. Like, as a buy-in, it is guaranteed to see play in Legacy, but the potential homes that and new things that it could create, like the new decks that it just could create on its own, because the rate for everything that it does is so good. Like, 2-mana loot is as pricey as you could make it, but it's not unreasonable. Yeah. And the fact that you can make a treasure or a 2/2 rogue at 0 mana at instant speed, that's really powerful. And
like you're gonna get rid of stuff that you don't need, right? Like that's the thing is like looting isn't just like, oh, I have to do this to like make this thing happen. Like sometimes you just have a handful of I don't need any of this stuff.
This also isn't necessarily. This card isn't necessarily just loot. A lot of the time, it's just going to read loot. Or it's a lot of times it's going to read loot, draw a card draw 2 cards essentially in the form of a mana source, or in the form of a 2/2. So, like the loot is deceiving because it's really drawing more than 1 card for 2 mana. You're drawing either an additional mana source of any color, so it's fixing, or you're drawing a 2/2 rogue creature token. So that loot is extremely deceptive. It's not just loot. This card is extremely powerful. Like if you take anything away from this episode, it's pick these up because they will be attached to Urza Saga for as long as Urza Saga is legal, and it is extremely good.
That card, by the way, is called Artificer's Intuition.
That's it, Artificer's Intuition. That's the enchantment. That's 1 in a blue, and you can discard a card to tutor stuff. Like that card has never seen play. It has never had enough of a home for it to do things. But this card is asking you to do all of the things that Intuition does, and it's another home, another way to find it. So,
Fifth Dawn.
Between Artificer's Intuition and Urza Saga, I mean, I don't think Artificer's Intuition, every time I think it's going to make it never makes it. Because it's another one of those things where it doesn't do anything by itself, and it asks a lot of you in terms of your deck building. But
I have to say, Phil, that I wasn't really sold on Currency Converter until we started talking about it, and now I'm like, I'm psyched for it.
This one is the easiest slam dunk from the like. I'm not like coming up with new ideas here. This is all just Urza Saga just makes it so that this can.
We're not building Phoenix decks.
Here's the thing: if Urza Saga didn't exist, this is probably fringy, right? Like maybe you're playing it in some artifact synergy combo deck of some kind, or who knows. The fact that Urza Saga exists is what makes this a slam dunk. It will 100% see play. You will definitely sit across from it at some point if you're playing Legacy. Pick up your copies because when people recognize that it's essentially what Retrofitter Foundry became and it's worth way more than $5, you will wish you had bought a set. I will be doing the same after this episode is done. Highly recommend you do as well. Currency Converter is the slam dunk.
Not financial advice. Yeah, so anyhow, I think that does it for this episode. Real quick, we want to thank our Patreon supporters who gave us a pretty good idea for a couple of episodes coming up. If you want to get in on that, help us out coming up with episode ideas, jump in on the Patreon. That's patreon.com/EternalDurdles. It's right above us. What else? Get on our Discord. Jump in on the Discord. Join the conversation. We're on there every day, chit-chatting, talking deck techs, just, BSing with everybody anyhow. Like, what are you really going to be doing during work hours instead of just talking to us anyhow? So, like, come on. And I think that's it for
that's it. I think that's it. Buy your currency converters. Convert your currency into currency converters.
That's the way. Convert currency into currency converters. That's. You can't end on a better note than that. I think that's it for us. Have a good one, everybody.
Hey, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out this other video, and if you can, please support us on patreon.com.